There's something here I find hard to ignore. There's something that I've never seen before. Amanita is the name they cover over everything. Flowers cover everything, they cover over everything. The flowers cover everything. Flowers cover everything, they cover everything. Flowers cover everything. Flowers cover everything, they cover everything. Flowers cover There's something that I've never seen before. The flowers often bloom at night. Amanita is the name they cover over everything. Here you are, smell of gold, flowing in and filling up my hopeless heart. I'll never, never go. I'll dust my lemon life with powder, pink and sweet. The day I start, the day you change and fly away from me. You flicker and you're beautiful. You glow inside my head. You hold me hypnotized. I'm mesmerized. Your flames are flames. You kiss me dead. I'll dust my lemon light with powder, pink and sweet.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to CSZ Philadelphia's online programming and tonight's performance and presentation of Dr. Young Unpacks, the at-home version. Please welcome the star of Dr. Young Unpacks to the screen, Dr. Dana Young.
Hi, folks. How are you? You're sitting here with a beverage inspired by tonight's guest. Tonight is May Day, so we're celebrating with a little bit of May Day and May Day by talking a bit about demagoguery. And we're going to talk about all kinds of Latin terms that I didn't know until I read this brilliant book we're going to be talking about tonight with its author. First, I just want to say Dr. Young Unpacks was originally conceived as a live theater show where I would do a big deep dive, and then I would have an expert guest come on stage. And it was super fun to do in the theater, and it was a great audience experience. And so as we're thinking about things that we can offer our fans while the theater is dark, this is something that actually translates pretty easily to an at-home context, because I can interview people from all over the country and do it through Zoom. So thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much for playing. Tonight is going to be really fun, and you are going to learn a lot. You're going to learn a lot because tonight's guest is an amazing author and professor. Her first book, 2010's Founding Fictions, is really at the core of presidential and political rhetoric scholarship. She has a new book that's about to come out, and I got to read an advance copy, and it is called Demagogue for President, the Rhetorical Genius of Donald Trump. And yes, she put genius and Trump in the same sentence, and we'll talk about that. She is both a scholar and a prolific writer who writes for the popular press. She just had a piece in the Washington Post. She is often on television and radio. We are so lucky to have with us tonight Associate Professor in the Department of Communication from Texas A&M University, Dr. Jennifer Murcia. Hello, Doctor.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us on Dr. Young Unpacks. I want to just say, what is the location that you're joining us from this evening?
This is the dining room.
Oh, I mean like Texas. Where in Texas are you?
We're in a secret location.
Oh,
no,
okay.
We're in College Station, Texas.
Okay, excellent. Well, I am talking to you from South Jersey, which is not nearly as glamorous sounding as College Station, Texas. I tend to want to have the same beverage as my guest. I think that it's a nice sort of tribute to my guest. So my guest said basil and bluegrass. And I was like, okay. And she gave me the ingredients, didn't you, Jen? And so I looked it up. I was like, oh, I'll get the ratios online. I think you made this drink up. It is not a thing.
I didn't make it up, but the local Texas steakhouse with red leather booths and whatnot, it's my favorite drink there. So the Republic in College Station, Texas deserves credit.
Oh, excellent. Well, cheers to the Republic. I think that I did pretty well with the ratios. I think what we've got here, we've got bourbon, limoncello, fizzy water, which is seltzer, right? You said fizzy water. Seltzer?
Yes.
Is that Texan for seltzer? Okay. And a little lemon juice.
Who doesn't say fizzy water? Come on.
No. And here, the real trick though, was it said muddled basil.
Yeah.
Husband's like, okay, I'll go grab whatever liquor you need. And I said, you need to go get fresh basil for me to muddle. So yeah, he wasn't able to do it, but I took the first basil leaves from my herb garden that I grew, and they are in here. So
That's impressive. I stole basil from my neighbor across the street.
at a socially distanced distance?
Yeah, she's away, so I went into her backyard.
Yeah, that is stealing. That's not borrowing. That's definitely stealing.
Not giving it back.
So I just want to say, first of all, the cover of your book is amazing. Now, I did read it, but the cover is also amazing. I think we have a picture of the cover of your book. Absolutely gorgeous. And I hear that there are prizes tonight that will be awarded for the best questions. And the prizes that will be awarded are that. So if you are one of the 3 winners of Best Question, you too can wear a Demagogue for President hat. So Jen, thank you so much for that. Here's how we're going to do that. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A section. So there is the live chat, which is also cool, but there's the Q&A where you can actually drop in questions. That's the spot that we will be consulting later in the show for you to ask questions of Dr. Murcia directly after we get through some big ideas. So let us get to some of those ideas. The first one, I have never learned so much Latin in my life, and I want to thank you for that. I feel smarter just from having seen the words. And the first word is simply the word demagogue, right? What can you tell us what does that mean? What is its origin? How are we to understand that? Because I think that word gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah, so demagogue is Greek, and it means leader of the people. So that's the actual literal translation of it.
Which sounds great.
Which is great.
Right?
We would in fact want someone to emerge from the people and lead.
Okay, so then how come we throw around this word like in a really bad way? I have this quote from Mencken that I'm sure, you know, because you've written a book about this. The demagogue is one who preaches doctrines he knows to be untrue to men he knows to be idiots. Ooh, that's harsh. I don't know.
That's harsh.
Take as
That is
well.
harsh.
It's a little harsh. So how does the leader of the people turn into one who is appealing to these baser instincts of idiots?
Yeah, so part of the reason why we think of the leader of the people as a misleader of the people is because the people who we know the most about from ancient Greece, like Plato, Aristotle, Thucydides, whoever.
You know
they
the most about. You
What?
know the most about those people.
Sure. Yeah, me.
Yeah.
They all hated democracy, right? Like as a form of government, they actually hated democracy. And so, you know, they didn't think the people should rule, and they didn't think that anyone should emerge from among them to lead the people. So that's part of it. And so that word has a lot of baggage because of that. So I think it makes sense to distinguish between a good demagogue and a bad demagogue. And so for that, we can turn to the Oxford English Dictionary, as we do. And the first definition from the OED is someone who defends the interests of the people against the other parts of the state, right? So a heroic figure who defends the people and their interests from corruption.
Which sounds great.
Yeah, we want that. We absolutely want that. The second definition is the one that, you know, you're more familiar with, which is someone who uses polarizing propaganda to appeal to the people or the mob, and does it for their own interest or gain. So that's much more like the version you threw up on the screen.
Yeah, that's a bit nefarious. So I want us to talk, you talk about different demagogues in different contexts, but for the most part, you are talking about Donald Trump. You're talking about the rhetoric that Trump uses. And I think what's useful about this is being able to point to things that he says and not just say, wow, I find that annoying or I find that harmful, but to say kind of why, like what is it that he's doing through these different rhetorical maneuvers. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is the concept of ad populum, the appeal to the wisdom of the crowd, right? Talk to us about what that is.
Sure. So in my book, I try to show how Trump was both a hero and a villain, right? So he embodied both of those versions or, you know, definitions of a demagogue. If you were one of his followers, you did, and you still do, see him as a heroic demagogue, defending your interests against, you know, the corrupt other parts of the state, the deep state, the fake news, whoever. And if you are anyone else, you see him in the negative second sense. So what I do in the book is I try to show how he used 3 strategies to get himself closer to his followers, to connect with them, and, you know, to help them to understand him as this hero who was fighting for them. So ad populum is one of those strategies.
So, Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I could talk forever. So ad populum is appealing to the wisdom of the crowd. When Trump does this, he's appealing to the wisdom, particularly of his people, not, you know, all of the people. And so it could be an argument based on popularity. So for example, like crowd size is one of the things that he talks about a lot. That's an ad populum appeal. It could be, saying that the elites are corrupt and they don't know as much as Trump's good people know.
So when he's talking about ratings, and he's talking about, having better ratings than The Bachelor and stuff, that's not just him being a narcissist and bragging. That's actually him trying to put forward evidence in the popularity of his appeal and his arguments.
That's right. I think he has a will to market, like Nietzsche talked about the Übermensch and how the Übermensch had a will to power. Trump has a will to market, and the way it manifests itself in part is through, branding the Trump presidency, everything's the greatest, and hyperbole and all that. But you're right, it is an ad populum appeal, and it's very circular, right? So, I'm the greatest because my good people all love me and pay attention to me, and they're the greatest, and I'm the greatest, and we're the greatest. And that's how we all know that we're the greatest, that we're so popular.
And they all love me because I'm great, and I'm great because they love me. Tautologies play a huge role in the rhetoric of Trump. I wanted to talk a little bit about, you talk about the concept of political correctness as one of the issues that Trump uses to engage in these ad populum appeals, because political correctness itself is not popular. And so he rails against political correctness. So I came away with a couple of questions. One is political correctness actually a thing, or is that a social construct? Is it true that there is this sort of movement to police speech, or is that itself something that is manufactured by those who don't want speech policed? And why does he use that in that way?
Yeah, so he attacks political correctness because it's unpopular, which, by the way, I didn't ever look at the research on that, and I was really surprised to find out how unpopular a term it is, actually.
Yeah.
Something like 80 or 90% of America thinks political correctness has gone crazy. But he uses it as a sort of get out of jail free card, right? So if he attacks political correctness, then you can't attack him for anything he says. So in that way, it's a very cunning argument to say like, oh, they're just policing me. I don't have time for political correctness. He usually blames it on women, right? Women care too much about what men think, and real men shouldn't listen to women or be policed by them. So in that way, it's really brilliant. Is there actually a thing called political correctness, or is it a construct? I think it's more of a construct, but it's sort of that idea that there are better and worse ways to refer to people, groups, whatnot, and that some of them are reifying or objectifying or whatever, and others aren't. And maybe we should treat people with human dignity.
Well, it's interesting when you say there are better and worse ways to sort of refer to people and things. And, but the language of political correctness, railing against political correctness, never frames it in terms of better and worse ways. It frames it in terms of, they say we can't say this, as opposed to what is often the call is, maybe think about other ways to word things so that, the person that you are speaking of or speaking to does not feel dehumanized in the moment. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, when you talk about appeal to the wisdom of the people or the wisdom of the crowd, what I came away with, and this, tell me what you think of this. If the appealing to the wisdom of the crowd really is about talking about criminals and saying like, well, you shouldn't protect their head when you put them in the back of the paddy wagon, or, we're talking about how we can't waterboard terrorists, but that's crazy because they're terrorists. And speaking about maybe communities of color in certain ways and women in certain ways, are we to assume then that human nature is actually base? If it is working in this way, if it is appealing to that wisdom of that crowd and it works, are people bad, Dr. Murcia?
People may be bad, but I don't know if we can extrapolate that from the rejection of political correctness. So one of the things that I try to do in the book is to explain that what separates the heroic demagogue from the dangerous demagogue is whether or not they allow themselves to be held accountable for their words or actions. So a demagogue is an unaccountable leader. A dangerous demagogue is an unaccountable leader. And so railing against political correctness is a great strategy to avoid accountability, right? Because then you can just say, they're being politically correct. You can't trust them. They're just poll tested and teleprompted. You know, it's political babble. You know, they're stooges of unseen donors, right? It plays into this sort of hypocrisy narrative and distrusting narrative that Trump really ran on. I don't know that we can say people are good or bad, but I can say that Trump's followers really derived pleasure from breaking the norms of political correctness, right? So when they attended his rallies, you know, when they support him on Twitter or Facebook, they use language the way he does. And they do it, you know, as a kind of joyous celebration. It's liberating for them.
One of the things that I think is fascinating and you know, as someone who has studied rhetoric and the mediated spectacle for years, in political communication, we've spent a long time sort of railing against the fact that news media and political strategists and operatives do create this false narrative. They create, you know, these mediated events that are made to look real, but they're not. They set the agenda for the public, but the things that they put on the agenda may actually not be the things that are most important. So what's wild is I don't think that any of us actually imagine that there would be this person like Trump who would make some of the same arguments that we've been making for decades, but use it to advance a very different platform than what I think many of us thought would result from that. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the thing, you know, in my book where I'm like, Trump wasn't wrong about that.
He wasn't wrong.
He was not wrong. And I quote Matt Taibbi in his book, Insane Clown President, on that, because I thought that he had really good points to make about the way that the media machine and, you know, political consultants and all of that function to create a spectacle. The thing is that Trump says or claims, you know, and we can talk about this with Alex Jones too, right? That he claims to be authentic, that he's just speaking the truth and telling it like it is, and he's the real deal. But he's creating a different kind of spectacle. He calls it authentic, but it's really just trying to take the agenda setting power away from the mainstream media and to do, you know, what he wants to do and to set the nation's agenda himself. He's been very successful at it.
And I think that that is partly why the mainstream media has such an antagonistic relationship with him, because what they want to do is say, no, but this is a spectacle. And he's like, how dare you? You know?
That's right.
Yeah,
and
so
they can't, and they can't acknowledge that, you know, the image events that they create are in fact an image event and the spectacle, because then they, you know, have given the lie to 50, 60 years of what they've been doing. And so, yeah, I mean, it really is asymmetrical. He's got the media in a double bind, and, you know, they don't know how to deal with it. They give him billions of dollars of airtime, and they can't hold him accountable. It's very frustrating.
We are in a pickle. We're going to talk about some sort of possible ways out of this towards the end of our conversation. I want to talk to you about the concept of a paralipsis, because this is something, if you do not follow Dr. Marcia on Twitter, you should, because she is actively deconstructing rhetoric in the moment on Twitter. And one of the things that comes up a lot is this paralipsis. That is when Trump basically says, well, I'm not saying this, I'm just saying. With kind of like, who am I? What do I know? But I'm saying this thing and it seems to be true. People are saying, I'm not saying. There's a lot of this. Can you talk to us about this and why he does it and why it is genius?
Yeah. So the genius part, by the way, from the title, so if a demagogue is an unaccountable leader, Trump is a genius at preventing us from holding him accountable. You know, whether you want to admit it or not, he's really, really good at developing these strategies of distraction and dissimulation. And so paralipses is probably the best example because it's right there in the expression itself, right? So you know that he knows what he's doing because he tells you, I shouldn't say this, but I'm not really saying this, right? And even, you know, with retweets, he loves to retweet inflammatory content or content that supports him, that make, you know, be from white nationalists or conspiracy theorists.
But he's just sharing it, Jen.
He will say, what? It's a retweet. It didn't come from me. It was somebody else. You know, I'm starting conversation. It's just part of the pattern, right? So anything he can do to, you know, indict others, circulate content that's favorable to him, and makes other people look bad, that distracts or whatever else, he uses those strategies prolifically. And so paralipses is one of them. This is, you know, sort of off the record, and it's not my story, but I'm going to tell it anyway because I had some beverage tonight. But there's a reporter who on Inauguration Day happened to be next to one of Donald Trump's ex-wives in Washington, D.C. And for some reason, this reporter asked her about paralipses. He was like, so paralipses, Donald Trump? I'm not saying, I'm just saying. And Trump's ex-wife was like, oh, hell yes, he does this.
He knew what they were talking about, first of all?
Isn't that weird?
Is this true?
It is actually true.
That's
not
crazy.
on the record, and I'm not going to tell you which ex-wife, but she was like, yeah, absolutely, that's what he does.
Isn't it funny, though, that there are so many ex-wives that, like, by not saying which one, it could be anyone.
Could be. Family values.
Could be. So I want to talk about a couple of things. Are these examples of paralipses? Because I just want to make sure that we understand what these look like. Things like when he talked about the refugee crisis, and he said some of these refugees could be ISIS. I don't know, but it seems like they probably are. I mean, I don't know that they are, but it seems like they are. With a hint of suggestion, but a little deniability involved.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, sometimes the form is more exactly, I'm not saying, I'm just saying. But yes, like the general pattern is exactly that.
Another one was these caravans from Central America could be criminals and murderers. I don't know. Literally, that's a quote. The other one that you wrote the op-ed about that I think is so interesting, when he talked about how the coronavirus could be killed by disinfectants injected into the body or UV light. And he's basically like, I'm not a doctor, but da, 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 da. And then later on, he talked about him being sarcastic. Do you put this under the umbrella of paralipsis, or is it distinct?
Yeah, in my book, I tell a story where he uses the sarcasm defense, and it is a story about paralipsis. And it's when he got in trouble for asking Russia to hack Hillary Clinton's emails, the Russia, are you listening moment. And his defense was, oh, it was sarcasm. You know, you don't know anything. It's just sarcasm. It's nothing. It's no big deal. And it's not sarcasm. It is irony, probably, saying two things at once. But sarcasm is something different. Sarcasm is ripping or tearing the flesh. It's a cutting or biting jibe. It's not I'm saying and not saying at the same time necessarily, which is... That's
the thing that always gets me, is that for me, in order for it to imply any kind of humor, there has to be some inversion of valence, meaning he has to be at least like literally stating the opposite of what he means. And when he's talking about, you know, injecting disinfectants, here's my sense of Trump, because I am not a rhetorician. I approach things from sort of the psychology of the message sender and the message recipient. I spend less time thinking about the meaning that's in the text itself, right? So when I hear him say these things, I imagine that he is someone who is a simple-minded individual who is trying to use existing understandable frameworks to impose upon things he does not understand. And he's like, well, the virus is dead the second you spray disinfectant on it on the counter. So we need to mimic that phenomenon in the body. So I actually feel like there is something there that he was trying to convey, which maybe isn't that crazy. I think what he's talking about is something that would be like an antibiotic if antibiotics worked on viruses, which they don't, which apparently he didn't know either. But what is, do you think that that's part of it? Is this, these are the frameworks that he uses to try to understand the world himself?
Yeah. So, you know, I think in that moment, he was just thinking out loud. You know, he's trying to be a big shot and like solve the problem. So he's like, hey, disinfectants, great. Like that. Love it. It's going to work. Do you think we could use that in the body? Let's check it out.
And that is what Dr. Burke said that he was doing as well, right? That he was digesting information in real time, I think the language was. We have a poll question that I'd like to send out to our audience right now. What do you think? Do we have a poll question? We do. Okay. When Trump mentioned the possible injection of disinfectants as a way to kill coronavirus, was he A, being sarcastic, B, thinking through possible solutions to COVID in real time, or C, trying to get us all killed? What do you think? By the way, these are called push polls, where I'm not actually interested in what you actually think. I'm trying to use it to advance an argument of my own. But enjoy. Let's see what the results are. Let's see. Take a second. Do we have the results? Oh, here we go. Here we go. Oh, thinking through possible solutions in real time. That is giving him the benefit of the doubt. Good. Okay.
And he was like, you can't even, I mean, it was dumb, right? And absurd, but you can't blame him for that, right? He was trying to like think out loud and solve a problem. What you can blame him for is what he did the next day, which is what I wrote about, which is where he tried to turn it on the reporters, right? So it's not that I made a mistake, because he can't ever do that because he won't be held accountable. But instead it was, the joke was on you and you didn't get it.
Right.
Look how clever I am.
And I feel like everything comes back to that, though. The idea that, and actually this goes directly into the next thing I want to ask you about, which is the concept of ad hominem attack, where nothing is about the substance of the argument that is being made, but ends up being an attack on either the media or individuals that he's at odds with, or individuals that are perceived as trying to take him down or threaten his power. So can you talk to us about ad hominem attacks, and actually maybe, if you want, how that was used in the face of that particular example we were just talking about?
Yeah, so all of the ad fallacies, the ad hominem, I talk about ad baculum, ad populum, they're all distraction techniques. So the ad means to shift. And so it's to shift away from what is the central concern and move our attention in a different way. And so in this case, it's moving our attention away from the argument towards the person. And there's different ways you can do that. You know, you can say that person's just dumb. You can say they're ugly. You can say they're not qualified. Trump is a master at using tu quoque, which is an appeal to hypocrisy, which says, you know, essentially they can't be trusted. They do it too, denies them standing. They're all delegitimizing strategies.
Okay.
So when we think about like how democracies die, one of the ways that democracies die is by denying legitimacy to legitimate political figures, right? To legitimate opposition. Trump in every way tries to undermine whoever might be opposition to him, whether it's the media or whether it's a political figure, a member of his own party. Whoever disagrees with Trump is a bad person for any number of reasons. I'm
trying to understand, you know, obviously there is a very big sort of gendered and racial component to his use of ad hominems, especially, I mean, if you have watched any of the White House press briefings or you see how he interacts with reporters, there are certain ad hominem attacks that seem to be reserved for women, especially women of color who are reporters, referring to questions as nasty, people as horrid, third-rate reporters. And one of the things that strikes me is that, and this is where I can't figure out how to break the loop, is that those kinds of tactics seem to be really embraced by the people who love him, because they do see these individuals as fundamentally bad and evil. Like it's almost as though they think that this job of journalist, I don't know, why would people do it if not to, my sense is that for the people who like Trump, they see journalists as sort of power hungry and corrupt.
Yeah.
Which I think misunderstands actually how much money you can make as a journalist, quite frankly. But so can you tell us what's going on with that?
So when I talked about, there were 3 strategies that he used to bring himself closer to his followers. And there's also 3 that he uses to push him and his followers away from, everyone else. And so we talked about ad populum, appealing to the wisdom of Trump's people. Well, ad hominem is the antithesis of it, right? So it's the ironic counterpart. We are the good, great, people. American exceptionalism is us. We have been neglected, or, they've been attacking us for these many years. So there's that, like,
So it's justified.
His base. And then there's the pushing everyone else away part, right? Which is, they are corrupt. They are hypocrites. They are out to get us, and it's irrational because we are so great, right? So like constantly pulling himself closer to his followers who he loves, and pushing himself and his followers away from these others who have no redeeming qualities, whose arguments and questions aren't valid, and who can only be denigrated. So one of the examples in the book is poor Jeb Bush.
I know. And by the way, here's the problem with the ad hominem attacks that he uses, is that they're not completely out of nowhere. They're not completely fabricated. So talk to us about Jebby Jeb.
Yeah, so I write about how he attacked poor low energy Jeb. And, it took him 2-3 times, maybe 4 times before he found just the right attack that resonated with people, that people were willing to like amplify and recirculate for him, which is, I think, interesting in its own right, just to trace that out.
Yeah.
Jeb Bust, for example.
Well, also, you know what? The low energy Jeb worked so well, in part because of the logo that the Jeb Bush campaign had used, which, if you remember, right, folks, was Jeb exclamation point. So it was Jeb, except then when he was like giving his stump speech, he was kind of Jeb. So low energy Jeb was like, it was very, very smart.
It was, and it fed into narratives that I think were popular on the right about, how Romney didn't fight hard enough in 2012. And so, sort of associating Jeb with, feminine qualities, or, just not a fighter, not tough, etc. All bad. In the section or that chapter that I write about that, I think probably the reader like enjoys the mocking of Jeb Bush until they get to the point where I'm like, and by the way, this is why this is destructive for democracy. And then you kind of go, oh,
right.
Yeah,
in the same way that when he talked about like little Marco, and you're like, oh,
exactly.
Little Marco, and then you're like, oh wait, I am contributing to the fall of the American Democratic Republic by laughing.
Exactly. And so he was a master at ridiculing people who we wanted to see ridiculed, not everyone he ridiculed, but a lot of them. And, that really played to his advantage. So
the last concept, the last phrase here is ad baculum that I want to hit very quickly. And that is just, threats of force and intimidation. And you talk a little bit about how he appeals to these Second Amendment supporters and says that, they want to take away your Second Amendment rights. This is increasingly relevant right now as we have these armed militia folk inside the Michigan State House, basically threatening the legislators and the governor about the COVID stay-at-home orders, and Trump, you know, tweeting that these are good people. And I was wondering if you could talk to us about that. Is that the kind of language that supports that notion of threats of force and intimidation sometimes are necessary when you're on the side of all that is good and just?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's one of the recurring themes, I think, throughout the book is all of the times that Trump praised his supporters as good people while they were enacting violence.
Yeah.
So he often just explained away violent acts as, you know, good people who wanted to make America great again. And so, you know, who's to blame them? Because they, you know, have a good heart, basically. He didn't say that, but he always would say that they're good people, they're fine people. You know, so when, you know, obviously disaster struck in Charlottesville, you know, he said there's good people on both sides, and people were shocked at that, but I wasn't. I mean, that was absolutely what you would predict he would say. That's what he does. So yeah, so threats of force or intimidation, one way to understand Trump's language is that all of it is ad baculum. It's all, you know, force. It's all compliance gaining and not persuasion.
It's like, I feel like he is id. He's just one big id. Is that like, he just feels everything. And I feel like if you feel like what you are working for is, you know, for all that is good and just, I mean, we've seen this play out where people, you know, the ends justify the means. One of the things that I think raises a real issue is for folks on the left who are trying to figure out ways to counter him and are like, but now we got to pull out the big guns because, you know, they have no rules. And so we got to do the same. And as someone who's an institutionalist and who really likes democracy, I'm like, that actually is not how this game will end up in a good place. That's how this game will end up with us not having a democracy anymore.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you're right. Like, it's very enticing to say, well, we'll just use outrage. We'll just use threats. We'll just use, you know, ad hominem. We'll just use all the things. We'll be
use all the things.
We'll use
Call
all the things.
Bad names. Be angry because they're crazy. Get mad. And sometimes I'm on Twitter and I get so angry, and then I'm like, well, but what am I doing? Am I helping? I'm not helping. You know, I actually have to give you credit because I met Dr. Murcia at the National Institute for Civil Discourse, where she was the keynote speaker the opening night. It feels like years ago, but it was just this fall. And she was talking about outrage sort of as a commodity that fuels the media ecosystem. And we'll talk about that when we talk about your InfoWars encounter. But she did make an appeal to, and you talked about how you can struggle as well, right? When you are in this space where you're feeling so angry, and thinking about how outrage is used as a commodity and it is so destructive. And that when you recognize it and it's being appealed to in you, you gotta put the brakes on, because you gotta figure out who's benefiting from me being this mad. You know, so thank you for that, because I feel like that was an important check that I forget from time to time.
Yeah. Writing that talk was a trip, because I was writing it, and then as I reflected on what I had written, I was like, oh no, this is actually like on me in certain ways. And yeah, it's interesting because I talk about outrage. I have my students read Sarah's book and Outrage Industry, and
Sarah Soberai and Jeff
Soberai, great
University. Good book. Helped me write mine as well. Which is
great book. Yes, your book as well.
By the way, this is my shameless plug.
It's beautiful.
It doesn't always hang on the wall, but it does when I'm making a studio. But yeah, so the outrage industry really talks about how this is the economic model that underpins this entire genre.
And once you can recognize it, like it really resonates with my students. I just graded a set of papers today about this, and they were probably the best papers of the semester. You know, just weekly reflections. The students are really like, yes, and I hate it.
Wow.
Yeah, they're really into it.
You know, I find the same in my students. Actually, I find that my students, when I talk about issues of political polarization, and I talk about, you know, not just that the parties are moving apart, but that people are increasingly hostile to the other side, overwhelmingly, my students hate all of that. And they are trying to figure out, like, how do we remedy this? How do we bring people together? How do we stop being angry at each other? Which always makes me feel like we're going to be heading in the right direction if there's such an appetite for that. Let's move forward a little bit here, because I did have a little fun. I like playing games. Okay, so right now, Dr. Murcia, we are going to play a game.
It's time now to play everyone's favorite either or game show, Demagogue or Doofus. And now, please welcome the host of Demagogue or Doofus, Dr. Dana Young.
Well, hi, ladies and gentlemen. We're here for our episode of Demagogue or Doofus, where Dr. Jennifer Murcia has a chance of winning another 20 minutes of conversation with me. We have 8 examples here of things that President Donald Trump has said, and we're going to have Dr. Murcia go through and tell us if these actual quotations from the president are examples of the rhetoric of a demagogue, or are they just him being a doofus? Okay, so let's start with number 1 here. Number 1. I think the world would unite if I were the leader of the United States. What is that demagogue or just a doofus?
That's confusing. I think that's probably being a doofus, because.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, I'm
being
not
a
sure.
demagogue isn't just about acting like you are the best thing since sliced bread. It has to actually engage and appeal to the people.
Yeah, so he does. So this is another one of his strategies, is American exceptionalism. He proclaims himself to be the apotheosis of American exceptionalism, all that is great and good about America. And so therefore he can fix the nation. But I don't really know what he means about the world uniting.
Okay, so that's just him being a doofus.
I think.
Okay, you think. Okay. Okay, so let's go to the next one. The fact is, I give people what they need and deserve to hear, exactly what they don't get from politicians, and that is the truth. What's that?
Yeah, I'm going to go with demagoguery on that one.
Okay, tell us why.
Yeah, so the fact. So if you remember, you know, the criterion that I use to distinguish between the heroic demagogue and the dangerous demagogue is whether or not they allow themselves to be held accountable for their words and actions. And so that is a frame which establishes him as this truth teller, that means that he can get away with saying whatever he wants. You can't question him because he's just speaking, you know, the awful truth. And anyone who contradicts him is a liar.
Okay. So now, example number 3, this is real. I understand steaks. It's my favorite food.
I'm going to say that's just a preference.
That's just that he likes steaks, Dana.
I don't know if he's being a doofus there. He's just saying, I like steak.
I'm just saying I like steaks. Okay, next up. This is an interesting one. We're going to protect Christianity, and I can say that. I don't have to be politically correct. We're going to protect it.
Yeah, that's probably going to be demagoguery. Again, like that notion of political correctness is us versus them, polarization and distrust. You know, they're hypocrites that are out to get us. And we're the good Christians, and I'm going to say that I'm going to protect you because I'm the protector of my people, who are the good Christians. But yeah, I think that's polarizing and whatnot.
So, you know, this is interesting. We're going to stay here for a second. So my dad and I talk politics all the time, and my dad watches Morning Joe, and he watches The View, and he was emailing me about how Meghan McCain had said something on The View that finally got him to really understand conservative Christian support for Trump. And apparently she had said, and I looked this up, she basically said that evangelical Christians, they don't think of Trump as like an evangelical Christian, but they see him as like a buffer that is present to protect them from this sort of secular progressive left. And I'm like, that is interesting, because that then makes sense to me, right? That he is so fierce. It's not because he's the evangelical Christian, but that he will kind of keep back the crazies from taking over. What is your sense of that? Because that's always something that's tricky to understand. Like, how can these Christian individuals put such support behind this particular person?
Yeah, there's a book coming out that is about evangelicals and Trump. Samantha Martin. She has a book coming out, and I wish I knew the title. I don't. But I think she makes a similar argument. She examined, all of the sermons that were given during the 2016 election, and really sort of looked at the appeals that were made. And I think that this is one of the points that she makes in that book.
Right.
A lot of people want to say like, oh, well, the evangelical community, they're just hypocrites because Trump is clearly not, one of them. So, it doesn't make any sense why they support him. But I think that that's a good argument, that he is, he's positioned himself as someone who will fight for them and their interests. I think bringing Pence in as VP was part of that. All of the images that you see of people like laying hands on Trump and praying over him.
And like there's that like woman who like does these, and that's like, I don't even know what they're doing. And there's memes that are very appealing, I think, about Jesus is like with Trump. But like they feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, our next example for demagogue or doofus is, there will be no lies. We will honor the American people with the truth and nothing else.
Yeah, I'm going to go with demagogue on that.
Okay, because it's again that notion of like that he is providing he's the truth teller.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I addressed just in the introduction of my book. Should we label him a truth teller like he wants us to, or should we label him a demagogue like others accused him of being? And so for that, I went to the concept of, and I'm not going to say this properly, Pharisaiestes, I think, maybe, which is the ancient Greek notion.
Ferris Bueller? Ferris Bueller?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. But one of the things that is central to the concept of a truth teller is that you have to be risking yourself. You have to be risking your own safety to tell this truth that you know to be true, that you feel obligated to tell to improve, humanity or whatever, the community. And Trump doesn't risk himself.
Yeah, I was going to say, what does he have at risk? He has very little at risk. Okay, 2 examples left. Nope, 3 examples left. Okay, next up. This is my favorite. We had automatic chemistry, Queen Elizabeth II and me. There are those that say they have never seen the Queen have a better time.
I'm going to say that's a doofus.
That's a doofus. I still love it. Okay, next up. I am totally off script right now. Oh, wait, hold on. That's not me. That's literally the quote. He says, I'm totally off script right now, and this is how I got elected, by being off script. It's true.
That is true. He is much less interesting when he's reading his script.
So much less interesting.
He's very entertaining when he's not reading his script. He says all kinds of wacky things. Some of it's funny.
It is funny. So you say when he's talking about anything about him being off script and being authentic and truth telling, that's sort of the language of demagoguery?
Well, it can be. I mean, I think in that instance, like he's really right. So one of the things that he did throughout the campaign is to say, you know, they're using teleprompters. I'm never going to use teleprompters because I just speak the truth. It's just me and you, and you know, we're here, and it's all good. You know, eventually he did start using teleprompters, but he has a very fraught relationship with them. I think he literally, like, he can't be controlled, right? So I think like the act of the words being on the page and he has to read them is like too much for him. He can't deal with it. And so he sounds really stiff. You know, he's not a very good reader.
He sounds terrible when he's reading.
Yeah.
He sounds terrible. Okay, and the last one, also a favorite. France is a great nation. It is being run. A lot of things are happening. That is real.
Yeah.
That's real. A lot of things are happening.
You know, he's just ad-libbing. He doesn't know what to say.
He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what he's saying.
And,
You're saying that's a doofus?
yeah, I'm going to say that's doofus.
Okay. You know what, Dr. Murcia, thank you for playing Demagogue or Doofus.
We're unsure if she won because she knew all the answers. Back to you.
Right? I mean, she's the expert. She decides what the answers are. It's called being a professor. It's amazing. Like, she gets to make up the answer key. Hello. So when I first heard you speak, you talked about this riveting tale of how you encountered firsthand the machinery of this sort of outrage industry and the spectacle of it. And you talked about these concepts that I keep thinking about, and the concept of the info warrior versus what you called the normie politician. And info warriors were based on the concept of Alex Jones's show InfoWars, which, if folks haven't seen it, it started off very low budget. He talks about conspiracy theories, and it's very threat oriented. And he himself, a lot of the things that he does are very disruptive to put himself in the role of a victim. And that is what you witnessed in the fall of 2018 when you were a speaker at a panel at Trib Fest. And we have a shot of a tweet that you shared from the panel, and you wrote, "Friends, this is Alex Jones. He came to our Trib Fest panel today with a megaphone and accused us of silencing him. I invited him to join us, take a seat, get a mic. He declined. He was not there for conversation. I wish he would have joined us to chat." Do you really wish that, Jen?
I do. In that picture is my bestie right there next to Alex Jones.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Every time I see that picture,
look at how much space he takes up. Can we see how much space he takes up?
Yeah. He's got
Lauren,
the man spread.
There's a lot going on there. So tell us what happened and why did he choose your panel and what did he do?
Yeah, so you can tell there aren't very many people there. There's not a good reason to be there, except for he lives in Austin, Texas, and that's where the Trib Fest is. And the panel—
That was convenient.
Right? The panel had his name in it, so, you know, that's—
Oh.
him. It was on weaponized communication and Donald Trump and Alex Jones.
Okay.
And then the third thing that attracted him was one of my panelists is a reporter named Charlie Warzel, who at that time was with BuzzFeed and now is with the New York Times. And Alex Jones had been deplatformed over the course of several months that summer from YouTube and from Facebook. And eventually—
And part of that, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of that was because of the role that he played in declaring that the Sandy Hook massacre was a hoax, and a lot of his info warriors, his viewers and supporters would actually literally harass the Sandy Hook surviving families. And
yeah, that's right.
What that was about.
He had a massive audience. He had 5 billion page views on YouTube or video views. You know, just so much influence, so much more than you would think. One of the things that I think is interesting about my book is the role that Alex Jones played in the 2016 election. You know, he's just everywhere. And
Well, can you talk about that? I don't know that everyone understands that Donald Trump actually like used Alex Jones's appeal as an inroad to reach certain people who are somewhat conspiratorially minded, like Trump himself is.
yeah, so, you know, Alex Jones had Trump on his show in December of 2015. They enjoyed one another's company. They were connected through Roger Stone.
That sounded dirty. I'm sorry.
It is dirty. It is.
Okay. Okay. All right. We'll leave it at that. Keep going. Okay. So they enjoyed each other's company.
They enjoyed each other's company. They mutually congratulated one another on being excellent and awesome and, you know, trying to save the nation. And, yeah, so what I show in my book is, you know, just sort of the number of times that a narrative or a fact or a talking point or a strategy emerged with Alex Jones and InfoWars, and then, you know, bubbled up through various right-wing sources to be something that Donald Trump said during the campaign. So propaganda scholars call that narrative laundering. So that, you know, other people call it mainstreaming, right? Normalizing or mainstreaming ideas.
We love our buzzwords though, don't we?
Yeah, you know, there's all kinds. And so, you know, things that people would never consider probably were said by Donald Trump. And so a lot of people were exposed to Alex Jones's ideas who maybe wouldn't have been otherwise and didn't know that those things came from, you know, this conspiracy theorist.
So when he showed up at TribFest, probably because of this other panelist and because his name was on the panel, he shows up with a bullhorn and his man spread in the front row and proceeds to do what?
Yeah, so he came with camera crew. He had two camera people. He had two Confederates who he had prearranged to attack him.
For those folks who are not in sort of social science or humanities, Confederates are not soldiers. Confederates are individuals who are like, they're plants. In the theater, we call them plants. It's a plant in the audience.
Yes, and it's fascinating. You know, I was able to see just a lot of different camera angles from the moment because, of course, he had his two camera people there. I had a camera. Some of my friends and students were in the audience. They had cameras. Everybody pulled out their camera, right, when this thing happened. So I was able to see lots of different angles. And, you know, these people come in from outside of the scene. He calls them in, you know, he's telling his camera people where to stand and how to get the best shot. He interrupts himself in the middle of his rant to tell me that I have my phone in the wrong, you know, direction. I have it, you know, vertically and I should have it, you know, this way.
No, he does not.
Oh yeah, it's in the video. Yeah, he fully does that. He's like, hey, sweetie, you gotta...
Had he started like ranting about how everything is unfair?
No, he's mid-rant. He's like, you people are the ones who put Stalin into power. And then he looks at me and he sees my phone is wrong. And he's like, oh, honey, you got to change that for the aspect ratio. Literally said aspect ratio.
No, he did not.
He did.
You know what, to be fair, he's right.
He was right. And I changed my camera.
He is not right about gay frogs from whatever. But he was right about your aspect ratio being so wrong.
He was right.
This is crazy to me. So he completely understands that it's being documented and he still lets down the mask to say these weird directorial things to you. So
Yes.
does he not know that he's going to be exposed as a fraud?
It wasn't about that, right? So this is why I invited him to sit down because I thought it would actually be really cool for the, 10 people or whatever who were there to be like, hey, Alex Jones, like talk to us about like what you think you're doing with your show. Like talk to us about how you come up with your conspiracies. Like, like let's get the
They're
inside,
not conspiracies.
Yeah, like I thought that would be cool.
It would be very cool.
I thought that would be interesting and cool for the people who were there, who were, probably hoping, let's be honest, to see Alex Jones. But that wasn't what he was up to. He wasn't about that, show, that image event.
Yeah.
He didn't want to partake in what we were doing, and help us out. He was creating his own reality. And that's the thing that, he shares in common with Trump is, this is the second or third iteration because he starts to distort our faces and whatever.
Oh, look, there you are.
Yeah, there I am, and Charlie too, and some members of the crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wait, so just to get this clear, I mean, maybe it doesn't matter, but his whole point was to like talk about how you guys are Stalin-esque and what, policing speech, political correctness stuff, policing speech.
Yeah.
Same drum.
He came in as a free speech warrior. Especially Charlie had got him deplatformed from Twitter, which is a big deal for him.
Yeah.
I mean, he might have liked to have been on Twitter today when everyone was talking about him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can we just say that it's very, very bizarre? I don't really talk about Alex Jones, but I wanted to talk to you about this because I feel like you have such a unique perspective, having witnessed this particular moment and watching what was going on behind the scenes. And today, I guess, or was it yesterday, that Alex Jones decided to say, I guess on his show, that he's considering eating his neighbors, literally eating them. So, timely. We're timely here.
Very timely. The grocery stores are open here in Texas, Alex Jones. They are well stocked.
Was he trying to say that his neighbors are jerks and so he wants to kill them and then eat them? Or was he just like, I need food?
I thought it was about, I don't know. There was no context, right? It just circulated. So who knows?
Who knows?
What he said before that led him to say he was going to eat his ass.
So what ended up happening from all of that? He then used that footage and that moment as part of his content to talk about him being aggrieved and deplatformed.
Yes. So, he's a free speech warrior. And so we were preventing him in his free speech from his, the truth telling. And so about a month before, he had attacked Marco Rubio. If you remember, there was something where he went and confronted Rubio.
And Marco Rubio did not know who he was. He was like,
he was like, don't touch me, bro.
It's like, what? Who are you?
Yeah. So Alex Jones got a lot of attention for that. It was mainstream media story. And I think people decided that they weren't going to give him attention and amplify his content when he did these things. So, he went and tried to make this thing happen kind of like that, where, he was being attacked and he was the victim. But mainstream media didn't pick up the story. And so it didn't go anywhere. So he kept, re-editing it and, did you hear? And wow, did you believe
But he
it?
didn't get a lot of traction.
Nobody cared. And, he even emailed or texted several times one of the two reporters there on the stage with me to say, hey, dude, are you going to write a story about that? Are you going to write a story for your column?
Oh my gosh. It's almost sad and pathetic in a way. It's almost
a little sad.
So I'm a little sad. I want to talk about sort of where we go from here. I think that one of the best contributions is the fact that you don't put all the blame necessarily in your book on Donald Trump himself. You talk about Trump as a symptom, and you root your final chapter in the book by Levitsky and Ziblatt, the How Democracies Die, which, by the way, it's right here. And I was like, hey, how cool is that I have that right here? Hi. And you talked about controlling the uncontrollable leader and what kind of aspects of institutions are there that we can put in place to control the uncontrollable leader. They talk a lot about the role of parties and party elites in reining in uncontrollable leaders. And unfortunately, we're not actually seeing that from our party elites on the right. Instead, you talk also sort of in general about the role of trust in facilitating democratic health. And so, you talk about the way forward. And I have a quote from you here. I think we have on a slide. Hello, slide friend. The way forward on a slide. It's on a slide. No, there it is. The way forward is to create and maintain a political community that never reaches crisis levels of alienation. A democracy based on the majority principle in which people trust one another and their government. Dangerous demagogues like Donald Trump have no power in a properly functioning democracy. And this is the political project of our time. We must defend democracy. And I love this because this is how your book ends, which instead of leaving me feeling like, oh my God, we're doomed, is like, there are paths forward, and it has to do with trust. So I wonder if you would just wrap that up for us, what that means to you.
Yeah, it's, so I end by kind of pulling from Ziblatt and Levitsky, but also, you know, a little bit of Dewey, a little bit of Horkheimer and Adorno, you know, critical theory. And
Frankfurt School, bitches.
that's right. Get some Frankfurt School up in here. And then that part that you quoted is me sort of wrapping up a discussion of Max Lerner. And, you know, Max Lerner is someone who we don't read a lot anymore, and I wish we would. So I try to quote him quite a bit. And he wrote a book called It's Later Than We Think.
Yep.
And that was in 1937. You know, so usually when, you know, scholars like us teach grad seminars on the public sphere, you know, we sort of show like Dewey and we show Lippmann and we talk about the feud and, you know, whether the public is phantom or should be and all that kind of stuff. And Max Lerner was someone who was writing at the same time, and he was far more to the left than Dewey was. And he was really about defending democracy against, you know, the sort of violence of propaganda. And so I just think that he's really, you know, someone to read in this moment, because I think we're in a similar time. And I love what he says, you know, like if you've done all that you can do, you know, with constitutions and you've hemmed in your political parties and all of that, then close up your libraries and just throw it all. And it really is about this crisis of inequality, of distrust, of the way that propaganda and public relations and, you know, the political spectacle has taken over democracy. You know, people are right to be distrustful, I think. You know, there's a reason why.
I think that that's one of the things that we really have trouble with as social scientists, who often talk about the predictors of these bad things are a lack of trust. But then you think about it, it's like, well, a lack of trust sometimes is deserved. So finding ways to sort of get out of that, the doom loop, right?
That's right. And, you know, to acknowledge that, yeah, like things have not been operating for the people, right? Like things have not been operating that way. But at the same time to say, you know, the appeal to hypocrisy and the tu quoque, the distrust, all of that just makes it worse. And it certainly isn't healthy for our democracy. So, you know, to like put that aside and say, you know, we're not trying to point fingers. We're not trying to do anything except for show you how this works so you can decide for yourself so that you're not being used as a tool.
I want to get to a few questions. There's so many great questions here. So let's give some quick answers to a few of these if it's possible. Let's see, one here from, I saw agreement. Oh, Irene asks, to what degree is Trump the individual distinct in his use of these techniques? Because in my opinion, these techniques are used by conservatives more generally. Is there an ideological sort of orientation to these techniques, or are they the techniques of a demagogue independent of ideology?
They are techniques of a demagogue independent of ideology. Like anybody could use them. And you could even use the techniques, like you could use parallipses and say, you know, I'm not saying, I'm just saying, as long as you're accountable when they say, well, what, you know, what are you saying?
What are you saying?
Then that's fine, right?
Yeah.
You know, because we definitely have examples of people using these strategies. The strategies themselves are neutral. At the same time, you know, it is a recipe, right? So what Trump does is very similar to what Adolf Hitler said you ought to do in Mein Kampf, right? And is very similar to what he did. the strategies are parallel. And so, like they're very effective at dividing, polarizing, creating distrust, attaching a person to, a leader. All of it we've seen before. He's not
unique in that way. So there are a bunch of questions on here that are, so folks seem to be bristling at the notion that this is strategic. And I'm sure you get this a lot. Everyone thinks, Donald Trump is kind of a frickin' idiot. So, Lindsay Hoffman says he's cunning, but I've always associated that term with intelligence. So is there a precedence of using it with someone who is not intelligent? And similarly, CSM says, isn't it possible that we're giving Trump too much credit? Do you think it's a strategy when maybe he's just an egocentric sociopath? And then Sharon says, do you really think Trump is that clever? Or is he just following directions from someone else? Someone else asks, who's pulling his strings? Jesse says, who's pulling his strings? And Kevin Coe says, kind of to wrap this.
Kevin.
Dr. Young characterized Trump as a simple-minded individual, which I did. Do you, Dr. Murcia, agree? If so, how does that square with the notion of his genius, as you understand it?
Yeah, I do get this a lot. So nobody wants to
sure.
believe that Trump is smart, right?
But how can he be both stupid and evil? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
So how do I answer this? So, okay, so one thing. So I started studying
in a concise way.
Yes. I started studying Trump's rhetoric very carefully in November of 2015. He has consistently done these same 6 things to get himself out of trouble and prevent himself from being held accountable, to attract our attention, to deflect criticism. I know he sometimes sounds like he's not so smart, but he is very consistent and very strategic about how he uses language.
You mean before his political career began, like back when he was in real estate and that kind of stuff? You mean the rhetoric and back then even?
No, I mean, I've read those books that he didn't write, but it's not that necessarily, but I mean, it is consistent with what he did in his, financial dealings and whatnot. Like you can't hold him accountable for that. I think that he has developed this really sophisticated armor, maybe, to prevent himself from being held accountable. It's amazing. I've never seen another politician. And it's partially because he has no shame and he just won't accept, blame.
Well, there's never, ever vulnerability. It's always deflect and deny. And I don't think that I truly understood Trump until I watched the documentary Get Me Roger Stone on Netflix, which finally got me to get who Trump was. I just want to get to one final question here. Terry Filico says, can you talk a little bit about fear? Because a lot of the demagogic appeal seems to be about fear in terms of what's motivating it. So how does the psychology of fear work in getting people to be receptive to the things that he's selling?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So he definitely uses fear appeals. The ad baculum, threats of force or intimidation, part of that is fear appeal. He really appealed to authoritarian voters. So there was a lot written during the 2016 election about, sort of the rise of authoritarian voters. Trump really appealed to them.
The idea of like the law and order president, right? That he would bring back law and order and respect for authority.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that research says that there's a group of people who see themselves displaced on the social hierarchy. They're very concerned about threats, external threats to the nation. They're concerned about threats to their own status, and that they want a strong leader, that they're willing to forego civil liberties in order to get that strong leader. Trump really took advantage of that, which is in a way, appealing to fear. One of the interesting things that he did with fear appeals is the Second Amendment stuff that he did, where, Republican voters, especially those that supported Trump, were, of course, for gun rights. So Trump didn't, he used fear appeals in that case to say that 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 they were safe now, and they would be if Trump were president, but if Hillary Clinton became president, then they would be exposed, right? That there was this plot, to let all these criminals into the country, to take away your guns, and to leave vulnerable.
And to not let them worship as they chose.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of it.
And one of the things that I thought was really strange, that I hadn't seen anyone else write about, is the way that Trump reenacted terrorist threats, around Second Amendment issues. Is that he would act, and he would shoot his audience, and he would shoot, literally shoot audience members and reenact these scenes and say, like, move over here, boom, and move over here, boom, and he would literally shoot his audience members. So if that's not a fear appeal, I don't know.
I don't know what is. Well, I would like to congratulate Irene, Kevin, and Terry, because you are the recipients of the Demagogue for President caps that Dr. Murcia will send to you. So Irene, Kevin, and Terry, please email me at dgyoung@udel.edu. That's dgyoung@udel.edu. And with your address, and I will get you your hat.
Can I just say why the hat is the cover?
Well, hello, make America great again.
Yeah, so one of my favorite quotes in the whole book is a woman in a focus group who says, "We know that his goal is to make America great again. It's on his hat."
He
right
there if he didn't mean it and if he wasn't going to deliver.
And so I wondered what would have happened if he would have told the truth and had his hat say "Demagogue for President." So that's why that's the hat.
Yeah, that's amazing. What would have happened? Oh my goodness. Dr. Chia, this is so great. The book is amazing. When is its official release date? It is coming out technically.
I think it might be out in June for some people.
For some people, it is outstanding.
They're having trouble, with the disruptions of everything. They're having trouble.
There's stuff happening right now. There's stuff, but folks, you need to get the book. It is really, it just helps you be smarter as you think about what he's doing and what his rhetoric means. So thank you so much for joining us, and everyone, thank you for joining us. We will probably have another Dr. Young Unpacks in the next month or so. Thank you for your support. And please continue to support your local arts community as they're in the dark. Dr. Murcia, thank you. This has been Dr. Young Unpacks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, folks. Bye.
It's the closest you will get to oh, a twisted child, so ugly, so ugly. Oh, a twisted child, oh, hug me, oh, hug me. One November spawned a monster in the shape of this child who later cried. But Jesus made me so, Jesus saved me from pity, sympathy, and people discussing me. A frame of useless limbs, what can make good all the bad that's been done? The lights were out, could you even bear to kiss her full on the mouth?
Good job, Don.
Thanks, Dave.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Hey, great job, Dana.
That was great. Jen,
Hold on one second. Hold on.
Hold on.
Oh, yeah, we can't see them.
I know it's because, yeah, hold on one second. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. Come on back. You should have a
Okay.
little thing saying come back.
There we go.
You are.
Yay! Oh, Jen, you're
Good
muted.
job.
That was so much
Wonderful job,
fun.
both of
Thank
you. Wonderful
Oh
job.
my
It was great.
gosh, you were so great. It was great. And you know what? We had very little attrition over the course of the time, which is why we were